KPMG, a global audit, tax and advisory services company, has posited that the recent decision by the Central Bank of Nigeria to raise the monetary policy rate, MPR, to 24.75% could help attract more portfolio investments. However, the firm in its flash notes tagged CBN's monetary tightening, the trade-off dilemma, stated that the decision, although a step in the right direction, was not enough to tackle the country's inflation. The Monetary Policy Committee of the CBN raised the bank's MPR to 24.75% in March 2024, bringing it to its two-decade highest and representing a 200 basis points increase from the previous 22.75% set in February 2024. Dr. Bati, the dichotomy of attracting more FX inflows and also taming inflation. According to KPMG, the recent MPC policy would attract more inflows, or perhaps would not make a big impact in taming inflation. Your take on this story?
Trade-offs. Atiku, that's the name of the expert who talked about trade-offs, in the development process. Atiku's argument is that for your society to develop, you trade off certain, variables to be able to achieve certain variables. And in the model provided by Atiku, sometimes you have a little dictatorship so that you can have a little freedom. You have a little inconvenience so that you can have greater efficiency. So I see KPMG's analysis here, or projection, as it were. Because, most of these analyses, they are projections. It doesn't mean that they are cast in stone. And they are saying that Nigeria will trade off some growth because of the tightening of monetary policy. 31.70 in February, inflation rate. And then, of course, they've increased monetary policy rate. They've increased, the liquidity ratio is consistent. They increased also the CRR, the cash reserve ratio, which is now at 45%. The received wisdom for organized private sector is that the cost of borrowing is going to be affected. Of course, if the cost of borrowing is affected, it will mean that, manufacturing companies, small and medium-scale enterprises will have issues in terms of access to capital. But my own bigger concern is that, look, beyond whatever projection KPMG is making, when we do monetary tightening, this aggressive monetary tightening that we have seen in February, we have seen in March, the two MPC meetings that have been held under Cardoso. What is the long-term effect? One of the concerns is that we've not seen the effect in the markets. Yes, in terms of the Forex regime, the Naira has stabilized a little bit. We're told that there has been more in terms of foreign portfolio investments coming in and all that. But I keep saying it that all of these economic permutations, unless it gets to the average man, we don't see that, coherence, in my view. Because while the CBN, the MPC, is trying to tighten rates and say, well, we check liquidity within the system, they've increased electricity tariffs. All of this will have a knock-on effect. The bigger objective of monetary policy and fiscal policy, which we have not seen waking up yet, should be the interest of the common man. How does it translate into an advantage? Some of the experts have said, because of lag effect, we're not going to see the immediate effect. But I guess the ordinary man is just interested in how it translates into quotidian reality for him. So if KPMG says, well, we're trading off economic growth projected to be even far under 4%. Once upon a time, this country was recording 7% growth consistently. And now, we're even being told that monetary policy tightening, yes, there will be FX inflows, but if there's no real growth within the economy, if the manufacturing sector is not working, if SMEs do not have access to liquidity, then you calculate the cost of it in terms of unemployment, in terms of job losses, in terms of higher costs, in terms of purchasing power parity within the economy. So the job of the federal government is not yet done. But KPMG has been very consistent in making projections. After all, they predicted long before inflation even hit 27% that it was going to go up. And their predictions have been consistently on target. But I just speak for the common man. All these econometrics, that they talk about, until the average Nigerian man or woman sees the effect in terms of chop money that people put down in their households and how, people are able to survive. All of these economics, financial engineering that they are doing will make no sense whatsoever in the long run.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, what Nigerians are looking forward to, despite the statistics and jargon, especially as it regards to monetary policy, the economy, is how it affects the common man. And indeed, we've said it, earlier on at the first instance when the MPC meeting was had and the rates were increased, we talked about the fact that it would further deepen stagflation in the country, especially as we see that production would reduce as a result of the increased rates. Lenders, it might also increase non-performing loans. This was also something that was highlighted and also agreed on by KPMG in terms of the number of people who might potentially default. Then the attendant effect on businesses and employers be unable to maintain keeping their workers, leading to more job losses, job cuts and job losses, further exacerbating the challenges that the common man has in Nigeria. But I like the angle that financial derivatives brings, which is that inflation will peak in 2024. However, following that peaking, we will then begin to see a gradual decline. And this is what we're looking forward to, in the sense of the long run. But when we talk about issues like this, especially when we look at the MPC increasing rates, we must also look at the other side of the divide, some of the bottlenecks that would make their policies a bit challenging. One of the things is that we've seen energy costs go high in recent times. We've seen transportation as a result of that go high. We've seen the removal of fuel subsidy. So it seems like a number of things are happening at once in order to fix the economic challenges that we find ourselves in Nigeria. However, time will tell. It won't be immediate in terms of the effect of these policies. And what the government has consistently asked for is patience, understanding. But one of the things that Nigerians are also looking at is a place where we can trust agencies, we can trust arms and agents of the government in terms of their policy direction. So whilst KPMG agrees that it would attract foreign FX inflows, there's also the conversation around hot money and the disadvantage of hot money, because any changes in the market would also see that money being withdrawn very quickly. So it's easy money coming, but in terms of sustainable long-term FX inflows, it doesn't seem like the policy direction so far will attract that. Other things must be put in place, and that's why we talk about insecurity, we talk about enabling environment for businesses to thrive, and other aspects like that. But just to keep watching, and in the next few months, perhaps in a year or so, we're able to see the positive impact of the policy directions, positive or negative, I must say, but hopefully positive. Move on to our next story. Former Vice President Atiku Abubakar has expressed apprehension about the proposed Lagos-Calabar highway project restarted by President Bola Tinubu. In a statement by his media aide, Paul Ibe, Atiku said the 700-kilometer Lagos-Calabar coastal highway plan should have commenced from Calabar if it were genuine and not another project intended to merely cajole the people. The People's Democratic Party presidential candidate in the last general election lamented that the road project looked dubious, with all the hallmarks of a white elephant project. Atiku said Umahi refused to reveal how much the project would cost, explaining, and I quote, he only explained that it would run through 9 states and would have a railroad running through the middle. Most importantly, the works minister said the project would come at zero cost to Nigeria, which is currently facing an all-time high level of debt. End of quote. All right. White Elephant project or not?
Well, I mean, it's the responsibility of government to provide infrastructure.
Yeah.
And one of the things that President Tinubu said in his Renewed Hope Agenda Manifesto is that infrastructure will be one of the major priorities of his administration. However, it is also within the rights of the opposition or of even concerned citizens who may not necessarily be partisan to raise questions when government announces projects. In this particular case, the subject at issue is the Lagos-Calabar coastal highway that the Tinubu administration is proposing. Now, what Waziri Adamawa Atiku Abubakar is saying is that there's something dubious about the project. And he has raised a number of questions about transparency and accountability. I think rather than dismiss, the concerns raised by the opposition politician of the People's Democratic Party, the Tinubu administration has a responsibility to be transparent, to tell us what the details are. It's not enough to say that Atiku Abubakar is being irresponsible. It seems to me that he has raised very valid questions. One, about the award of the contract for the highway, saying, look, high-tech construction company that has been given the project and that has been mobilized or will be mobilized to the tune of 1 trillion naira for a 47.47 kilometer stretch from Victoria Island to the Lekki Deep Sea Port, did not go through competitive bidding. And the statement by Atiku Abubakar said, look, this was supposed to be a build, operate, and transfer project. And because of that, it didn't go through National Assembly, it didn't go through the Federal Executive Council, because it's supposed to be funded 100% by the contractor. So the question raised in the statement by Atiku Abubakar and by extension the PDP is that how did the Federal Executive Council now come about approving over 1 trillion naira for 47.47 kilometers in the pilot phase? And if this is the case, that project is going to cost up to over 15 trillion naira. He's asking for explanation in terms of cost. So first, in terms of the openness of the bidding process, if indeed there was ever one. Two, the cost. How did the BOT 100% project end up being financed, in the first place by the federal government of Nigeria? I think that those are valid questions that nobody should politicize. I see that there's been a response by Mr. Bayo Ononuga, special advisor to the president on information, who has said, Atiku is being irresponsible. No, can we have the details about this contract? Number three, Atiku Abubakar is also questioning the integrity of that high-tech company, which he says is linked in terms of personal interest to the president of Nigeria. And that the president of Nigeria is conflicting personal interests and national projects. Many will recall that Lin Kuan Yew, in his book From the Third World to the First World, said that one of his major interactions with Nigeria showed him that in Nigeria, at that time, in the 60s, that the Nigerian people, they make policies to serve personal interests. Now, we don't expect that in 2024, people will make policies and back on projects to serve personal interests. So also at that level, the explanations will be in order. The final part of it is that route that has been chosen for the construction, the owner of a landmark, a major cultural and tourist center in Lagos, there have been stories over the weekend about him saying, this should be, the project is going to wipe out his investment and affect tourism in Lagos State and all of that. Well, the details are out there, but what Nigerians must also know is that under the Land Use Act, Section 1 thereof, Section 2, government can take your land in public interest. If it is going to be in the public interest, then of course, overriding public interest, the law even says, the best that government can do is to pay you compensation. So people, the sum of what Atiku Abubakar is saying is that separate personal interest, private interest should be separated from public policy. And if government is pursuing a particular project in the public interest, government itself has an obligation to make it clear that this is in the public interest, not in personal interest. I don't think it's something that the Tinubu administration can just wave off like that. They have to give us very robust explanation. After all, the 700 kilometers coastline highway is to benefit Nigerians. It will even have rail lines in between. It will have bridges. It will have, if we can get from Lagos to Calabar very quickly, it will be of benefit to us. But if it is to be of benefit to us, we must follow due process. There must be transparency. When I was going to school in Calabar, we used to spend about 12 hours from Utuk, Nyangete, from Djibou to Calabar. Okay, if you went by air, that would take you just about 45 minutes in those days. An air ticket was 45 naira, in fact 42 naira to get to Calabar. But if you have a coastal highway that goes direct all the way down, maybe it will be faster. Maybe we'll be able to get to our country, Calabar as we used to call it, within 5 hours.
A short time.
Yes.
I mean, on the surface of things, like you mentioned, Dr. Bati, it looks like a great initiative, especially when it comes to infrastructure investment. And recall that earlier, the Tinubu administration had announced the Renewed Hope Infrastructure Development Fund, which was meant to bridge inefficiencies, especially when it comes to infrastructure development. Waziri Atiku, in his statement, had also cited that fund, saying that the fund in itself was not transparent. So the crux of the matter or the issue is not Waziri Atiku trying to criticize another administration's project, but also raising pertinent questions around transparency, accountability, and integrity. And he cited a very good example of the Lekki-Ekpe Expressway contract that was given to the same high-tech for a 50-kilometer stretch of road with amounts of money allocated to it and 30 kilometers alone being delivered, whilst the Lagos state government had to absorb the rest of the responsibility, coming at a loss to the people of the state. So what he's saying is that we must check the processes. And the first thing you must look at is that if you awarded a contract in the first instance to a particular organization that didn't quite deliver rightly on that project, what is the justification for awarding them another contract, even perhaps bigger than the initial one? What is the justification for that? And what is the assurance that on this occasion they would deliver and it would not come at a cost to the people themselves? So the big question is not saying that this is not a great or laudable initiative by this administration, but there are critical questions that not just the opposition should be asking on behalf of the people, but the people must take an interest in understanding, because it's often been said that when contracts are awarded, it's not just for the benefit of the people, but it's usually self-serving in terms of personal interest. We're not saying this is the case in this instance, we're just asking for the proof that this is not the case in this instance. Recall that for this project to be executed, a huge chunk of investment by a private individual and some individuals will be affected. And according to Mr. Onimbe, who is in charge for the landmark investment, he said 12,000 direct jobs will be cut. If we're going to take the losses of these job cuts, then it better be well worth it. And it mustn't be to serve interest of some certain people, but must be for the benefit of the entire people, of Nigerians, of Lagosians, and people across not just the southwestern, but south-south divide. So Waziri Atiku has raised some pertinent questions. And again, as we say, we don't want responses from government spokespersons that would just, to talk about, other issues or peripheral issues and not address the critical questions that were raised by the opposition. How much money is going to be spent? If it was meant to be a PPP, and according to assurances from the Minister of Works that they already have the funding for it, why was funding also requested as a memo during the FEC? Was the amount of money released? What was the due process in awarding the contract to High-Tech as a construction company? So these are questions that we must continue to raise, especially as we look at development and infrastructure development, not just in Lagos, not just with the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway, but across different contracts as well. Great questions, and I'm hoping that we'll get proper response from the presidency to these questions raised. Move on to other news making the rounds this morning. The federal government has declared Tuesday, April 9 and Wednesday, April 10, 2024 as public holidays to mark Eid al-Fitr celebration. The Minister of Interior, Dr. Olubunmi Tunji-Ojo, who made the declaration on behalf of the federal government, congratulated all Muslims for the successful completion of the fasting in the holy month of Ramadan. And on the foreign scene, Britain's Deputy Prime Minister, Oliver Dowden, says the UK would stop selling arms to Israel if his government receives legal advice that Israel was in breach of international law through its actions in Gaza. Also in Israel's military, they've said on Sunday that it was reducing its numbers of soldiers from southern Gaza, leaving just one brigade in the area. The pullout is being interpreted as tactical rather than a sign that the war may be moving closer to its end. Today, the 8th of April 2024, millions will be eagerly looking to the skies as the moon will block the sun for approximately 4 minutes in a natural phenomenon known as a solar eclipse.